They laughed when she fell, and that was their first mistake. Not because she was fragile, not because she couldn't fight back, but because they didn't know who she was. The mud on her sleeve would wash off. The memory of their laughter wouldn't. It started that morning at Fort Garrison, a base carved out of dust and discipline. The wind scraped against steel hangers, carrying the smell of oil, sweat, and early coffee. Boots pounded gravel in rhythm, 1,000 drills blending into one restless heartbeat. Then she appeared. A small figure walking through the haze, her duffel bag hanging low, her steps steady but quiet. No insignia on her collar, no salute following her path. Just another transfer, the soldiers thought, another recruit trying not to stand out. Except she did. Not by what she said, but by what she didn't. Her silence carried something strange weight, like a storm cloud that refused to move. Near the barracks, a group of soldiers lounged against a truck, their laughter loud, easy, unearned. The kind that only lives in the absence of consequence. One of them, Corporal Vance, spotted her first. "Hey, rookie," he called, smirking. "You lost your babysitter." The others chuckled, eager for morning entertainment. She kept walking, eyes forward, expression unreadable. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't submission either. Just stillness, and that somehow made them angrier. Vance stepped into her path, blocking her way. "You deaf newbie, I'm talking to you." She stopped, adjusted her grip on the duffel. Her voice was soft, even. "I heard you." "Then answer," he leaned in. "Where you from?" "Overseas," she said. That should have been enough, but he wanted a reaction, something to prove his place to the others, maybe to himself. "Overseas, huh? Guess they ran out of men." A few laughs followed, sharp and stupid. Then came the shove, quick, hard, unnecessary. She hit the ground. The dust rose up like smoke, curling around her. And she didn't move. Not at first. The laughter cut through the morning, coarse, careless. But when she finally lifted her head, something in her eyes made the sound falter. There was no anger there, no humiliation. Just control, the kind of control born from pain already endured. She brushed the dirt from her sleeve, slow, methodical. Then she looked up. "Names," she said quietly. "I'd like your names." It wasn't a threat, it was almost polite. But the soldiers laughed harder, shaking their heads. "You don't get names till you earn them, rookie," one said. "Now get up, you're dirtying the ground." She rose, wordless. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then she walked past them, calm, unbroken, leaving silence in her wake. Behind her, Vance tried to laugh again. It came out hollow. Hours later, the rumors began. Something about a new base admiral arriving that afternoon, a woman, transferred from overseas command. No one knew her name, only that she'd seen combat where others hadn't returned. Some said she'd rebuilt a fallen unit from nothing. Others whispered she'd led a rescue mission that went wrong and carried that weight ever since. By noon, the whole base buzzed. Uniforms were straightened, boots polished until reflections stared back. Even the cocky ones from the barracks stood in line, hearts drumming with uneasy curiosity. And then came the sound, the echo of approaching steps. The command hall doors opened, light slicing through the silence. And there she was. The same woman they'd knocked into the dirt that morning, walking in, crisp uniform pressed, cap adorned with the silver insignia of an admiral. For a breath, no one moved. Vance's jaw locked. The others blinked, their laughter now distant ghosts in their throats. The realization hit like a cold blade, slow, cutting, merciless. She paused in front of them, eyes scanning the ranks. No anger, no gloating, just that same unreadable calm. When she spoke, her voice carried low and steady, a current beneath the surface. "Earlier today," she began, "a few soldiers decided to welcome what they believed was a new recruit. I commend their enthusiasm, but not their judgment." A ripple of discomfort moved through the line. Shoulders straightened, breaths caught. Vance swallowed hard. The weight of his cap seemed unbearable now. She continued, I've seen arrogance destroy more units than war ever could, and I've seen humility rebuild what pride tried to ruin. Her gaze found him not for long, but long enough to burn. So I'll give you a choice, she said. Learn what kind of base this will be, or be replaced by someone who already knows. The air thickened. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. No one dared move. And then she stepped back, nodding once to her adjutant. Dismissed. They saluted, voices trembling with the word. The line broke apart, silence following her like shadow. Later that evening the sun hung low over the training fields. The sky was bruised gold and red. She stood alone by the flagpole, cap tucked under her arm, the wind teasing loose strands of hair. Her name, Admiral Mara Hale, had spread across the base like a new law. Everyone now knew who she was, but none knew who she'd been. Her fingers brushed the fabric of the flag, the motion slow, reverent. Beneath her composure, memories stirred sand, smoke, the echo of a radio that never answered back. A young private approached, hesitant. Not one of the ones who mocked her, just a quiet observer who'd seen too much for his age. He stopped a few feet away. Ma'am, he said carefully, I think they'll learn from this. She smiled faintly, her eyes on the horizon. So will I, she said, because strength isn't proven by striking back. It's proven by standing firm and staying kind. The private nodded, unsure what to say. Then he left her alone with the wind. She watched the last of the daylight sink behind the training range. For a moment, the world was still, the kind of stillness that hides old scars. Her thoughts drifted. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And sometimes, she thought, it's earned the hard way. Inside the barracks, whispers carried. Some mocked to save face, others defended her quietly. But all of them felt something unfamiliar, shame and respect growing through it like roots in soil. Vance sat on his bunk, staring at the floor. The mud stain on his boot hadn't washed out completely. He thought about the look in her eyes, not hatred, not even disappointment, just understanding. And somehow that hurt more. He'd been in fights, lost men, earned medals, but he'd never felt this kind of defeat. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't bruise skin but leaves marks all the same. That night Mara stood in her quarters, uniform jacket hung on a chair, shirt sleeves rolled up. The room was sparse, just a cot, a metal desk, and a single photo frame turned face down. She took a breath and lifted it. Inside was an old picture, a squad of 6, all smiling, dust on their faces, sun in their eyes. 5 of them gone now. Her thumb brushed over one of the faces, a woman beside her, same rank once. She closed her eyes, hearing the sound of a helicopter fading into silence, the static of a call that never came through. That mission, the one that nearly broke her, was why she was here now. They'd told her this new posting would be a fresh start. But no one really gets one. You just carry what's left and learn to make peace with ghosts. The knock on her door was light. Enter, she said. A lieutenant stepped in, saluted. Ma'am, the evening reports. Also, commendations from command regarding your reassignment. She took the papers, scanning them without emotion. Thank you, Lieutenant. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. If I may, ma'am, the way you handled this morning, it set a tone. The men are different already. She nodded, setting the folder aside. Let's hope it lasts. He lingered another second. Permission to speak freely. She glanced up. Granted. Ma'am, they don't deserve you. Her gaze softened just slightly. Maybe not, but they'll learn to deserve each other. That's enough. When he left, she sat on the cot, exhaling. Outside, the base lights flickered on one by one, cutting through the dark like silent sentries. She let the silence stretch, long necessary. Somewhere a radio played faintly, an old song from another lifetime. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was almost a whisper to herself. Sometimes, she murmured, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She reached up, turned off the light, and let the darkness settle not as punishment but as peace. The kind earned after a long day of being misunderstood and standing anyway. Why did she still hear their voices? The ones that never answered back. Sleep came to Admiral Mara Hale like a negotiation, something earned, not given. Every night she bargained with silence, but it never stayed quiet for long. Somewhere between the hum of the heater and the creak of the barracks settling, the past found her again. Delta One, come in, Delta One. Static. Then nothing. She opened her eyes to darkness. Same nightmare, same unfinished call. The clock read 04:12. Outside, Fort Garrison stirred, early drills, echoing commands, engines warming in the cold dawn. The smell of metal and fuel seeped through thin walls. She sat up, pressing her palms against her knees until the tremor stopped. Another day to rebuild, another day to prove that kindness could still command. But somewhere out there, pieces of her old life were still buried in sand. By 06:00, the yard was alive, boots striking earth, orders ricocheting across open air. The recruits moved sharper now. No one dared speak over her voice. She watched from the observation platform, hands clasped behind her back. To anyone else, she looked untouchable, posture precise, gaze steady. Inside, she was measuring something invisible: progress, regret, and how much forgiveness could fit in a single command. Below, Sergeant Keller barked at a row of soldiers struggling with a field assembly drill. Move like your life depends on it, because it does. Vance was there too, face pale, sleeves rolled high, the mud stain still faint on his boots. He hadn't spoken since the morning she arrived. Pride was a strange poison. It burned hot, then left you hollow. She turned to her adjutant. How's morale? Hi, ma'am. Tension still thick but productive. Good, let it be uncomfortable. That's how they grow. The adjutant hesitated. Permission to ask, Admiral. Why not reprimand them formally? You had every right. She watched a private stumble, get up, try again. Paper doesn't change people, she said quietly. Moments do. Her tone carried no pride, only truth. He nodded, understanding half of it. After inspection, she walked the perimeter alone. The morning sun painted the base in bronze, hangars glowing, rifles gleaming, flags stirring awake. The rhythm of order had returned, but underneath it, she could sense something restless. Discipline was easy, redemption wasn't. Near the vehicle depot, two soldiers were arguing in low tones. She stopped before they noticed. You think she actually saw combat? One whispered. They say she led a Black Ops rescue in Al-Qara. Whole team wiped except her. Yeah, and they promoted her. Doesn't add up. Maybe she made a deal. Or maybe she failed. Mara didn't move. She'd heard the rumors before, recycled like old rations. Every new base tried to rewrite her story. She stepped into view. The men froze. Carry on, she said simply. They stammered something about maintenance checks and hurried off. She watched them go, expression unreadable. If only they knew the truth, that failure wasn't a rumor. It was a memory she lived with every day. The flashbacks came without warning. One moment she was walking through the depot. The next, the desert was back. Blinding sun, screaming rotors, sand whipping against her face. Target acquired 2 clicks east. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rio, shouting over comms. Copy, she'd answered. Hold formation. They were supposed to extract civilians trapped in a hostile zone, a quick in and out. But quick missions were fairy tale-y. The first explosion hit before they reached the perimeter. The second took their comms. The third took her team. She remembered running toward smoke, pulling bodies from fire, shouting names that never came back. Rio's was the last one she saw, pinned under twisted metal, blood in his teeth. Go, ma'am, he'd coughed. You still have people to lead. She hadn't, not after that day. Command called it an unforeseen complication. They handed her a medal she never opened and a transfer she never asked for. She accepted both, because arguing with loss only deepened it. Now, years later, the same wind whistled through Fort Garrison's open hangars. Same pitch, same emptiness. "Admiral." The voice pulled her back. Private Lynn, 19, soft-spoken, the kind of soldier who still said please when requesting orders. "Ma'am, supply logs are ready for your approval." She nodded. "Leave them on my desk." He hesitated. "Ma'am, may I ask something? Why did you come here? I mean, Fort Garrison's not exactly a headline post." She regarded him, not unkindly. Sometimes the quiet bases need the loudest lessons. He nodded, not sure what that meant, but grateful she'd answered at all. When he left, she exhaled, a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The boy reminded her of Rio's, the same earnestness before the world burned it away. She wondered how many more soldiers she could protect before the cycle repeated. At noon, she gathered the command staff in the briefing room. The air smelled of coffee and ink. Plans spread across the table, maps of supply routes and patrol zones. The meeting should have been routine. It was. "I'm instituting rotation changes," she began. "No more fixed squads. Everyone trains with everyone." Keller frowned. "Respectfully, Admiral, that'll unsettle cohesion." "That's the point," she said. "Cohesion built on comfort collapses under fire. I want adaptability." A few exchanged looks. Vance was there too, silent, seated at the edge of the table. He'd requested to remain on duty despite being reprimanded informally. She allowed it, partly to test him, partly to test herself. She continued, "We'll also reinstate the night sim drills. Too many of you treat peace as permanent. It is." The room went still. Finally, Keller asked, "Permission to speak freely?" "Always." He leaned forward. "Ma'am, the men, they respect you, but they don't know you, and they're scared of what they don't know." Mara met his gaze. "Then let them learn. Fear can be educated." Her voice was calm, but inside she felt the familiar sting, the gap between who she was and who they thought she was. She couldn't bridge it with words. Only time. "Dismissed," she said. As chairs scraped and boots retreated, Vance lingered. "Admiral," he began, unsure. "About before." She looked up. "Before?" He swallowed. "The first day I didn't know." "I know you didn't." He waited, maybe hopping for forgiveness, maybe punishment. "You should have reported me." She studied him for a long moment. "I could have, but tell me, Sergeant, would it have taught you anything?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "No, ma'am." "Then we're even." He nodded slowly, shame and relief mingling like oil and water. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said quietly. "Just do better." When he left, she finally allowed herself a single breath of exhaustion. Command wasn't about authority. It was about endurance. Evening fell fast. From her window, the base lights flickered on a constellation built by order. Beyond the fences, the desert stretched endless, swallowing the horizon. She poured herself a cup of black coffee, hands steady now. The bitterness grounded her. Her datapad buzzed, an encrypted message from Central Command. She hesitated before opening it. Subject: Alcara mission review reopened. Her stomach tightened. After all these years. She read the rest slowly. "Due to new evidence and survivor testimony, your command decisions are under reevaluation. Expect inquiry contact within 72 hours. Her fingers went cold around the cup. They were reopening the wound, again. She set the pad down, pressing her knuckles to her temple. For a long minute she just breathed. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Not again." Because she remembered what inquiries meant: clean rooms, colder questions. Men in suits asking how 6 good people died while she lived. "Why did you go back for them, Admiral?" Why didn't you call for extraction sooner? Were your emotions compromised? As if care were a crime. She stared out at the desert, same color as the one that had taken her team, same silence after the explosion stopped. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with her. Later that night, the base was quiet except for the rhythmic echo of Boots Vance, doing extra rounds he wasn't ordered to. She saw him from her window, a single figure cutting through the dark. He was changing. Maybe guilt could teach discipline where pride couldn't. She turned back to her desk and picked up the photo frame again. This time she didn't hide it. She placed it upright beside the lamp. 5 faces stared back. One of them Rios, smiling like he knew something she didn't. Maybe he did. Her throat tightened. "Still trying, Lieutenant," she murmured. "Still trying." The hum of the base generators filled the silence like a heartbeat. Outside, the flag snapped once in the wind. She wrote a message draft she didn't intend to send. To Command Inquiry Board. From Admiral Mara Hale. Subject Alcair. I'll answer your questions, all of them. But understand this, leadership isn't measured by survival or success. It's measured by how much truth you can carry without letting it crush you. She read it once, twice, then deleted it. The truth could wait. She turned off the lamp, letting the dark settle around her. The kind of dark that reminded her she was still human, still capable of doubt, still haunted by choices that looked brave on paper and unbearable in memory. Out on the training fields, someone was laughing softly, relief after a long day. The sound drifted up to her window. For a heartbeat, she almost smiled. Then she whispered the thought that always came before sleep, the one she never said aloud. Sometimes the hardest part of command isn't being obeyed. It's staying kind when the world tells you not to. And with that, the base went still again. Just another night at Fort Garrison. Just another battle no one would ever see. Why did they start standing taller around her? No one ordered them to. She never shouted. But something in her silence changed everything. By the 3rd week, Fort Garrison no longer sounded like it used to. The laughter was quieter now, not gone, just disciplined. Orders carried weight again. Even the morning drills had rhythm, a kind born not of fear but respect. The base had become sharper, more aware. And every soldier knew it began the day the Admiral arrived. But what none of them knew was that the Admiral herself was waiting for something too. An inquiry. A reopening of wounds she thought were long buried. For now she carried it alone. The sun broke over the horizon in pale streaks. Admiral Mara Hale walked the length of the shooting range, hands behind her back. Target dummies lined the sand berms, pocked and scarred from a morning's worth of drills. The soldiers straightened when they saw her coming. No words, just her presence. She stopped beside Private Lynn, who was trembling slightly as he aimed down his rifle sights. "Breathe," she said softly. He froze, startled she'd spoken to him at all. "Ma'am." "Not like that," she corrected. "Don't chase the shot, let it come to you. Let the breath steady your hand." He nodded, tried again. The next round hit closer to the center. She didn't smile, but her tone softened. "Better again." When he fired the 3rd time, bullseye. The look on his face said everything. "See," she murmured, "patience outperforms panic every time." She turned to leave, but he called after her. "Ma'am, may I ask something?" She paused. "Yes." "What happens when patience runs out?" She met his eyes, young, curious, unscarred. "Then," she said quietly, "you rely on purpose instead." She walked away, leaving him with more to think about than he'd expected. Inside the operations tent, Sergeant Keller watched through the open flap. "She's got them hooked," he muttered, half to himself. "Hooked?" Vance asked, joining him. Keller nodded. "Look at them. Every move she makes, they mirror it. That's not fear, that's respect." Vance said nothing. He hadn't spoken much these days unless necessary. The shame from that first encounter hadn't faded. But it was changing shape, from guilt to responsibility. "You ever seen someone lead like that?" Keller asked. Vance shook his head. "No, she doesn't lead. She calibrates people, like she sees who you could be before you do." Keller grinned faintly. "You sound like you're quoting scripture." "Maybe I am." The two men watched as the Admiral crossed the yard, her figure cutting against the light, steady, deliberate, untouchable. "Guess we're lucky she's on our side," Keller murmured. Vance didn't answer. He was thinking the same thing, but also wondering how long she'd stay. That night the base gathered for briefing in the mess hall. Not an order, just something she started doing, informal. She called it round table reflection. Each evening soldiers could speak about missions, training, even mistakes. No ranks, no salutes, just honesty. At first they'd thought it was a trap. Then they realized she actually listened. That night one of the newer recruits, a medic named Duran, stood up, voice shaking. "Ma'am," he said, "I was deployed before here. My last co said emotions got people killed. That caring was weakness, but you," he faltered, "you don't command that way." She looked at him, not as a superior but as a person. "Do you think caring saved you or killed you?" He hesitated. "Saved me, ma'am." "Then maybe your co was half right," she said gently. "Emotions can get people killed, but so can the absence of them." The hall was quiet. Even the generators outside seemed to hum softer. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've buried soldiers who followed orders perfectly, and I've saved lives because someone disobeyed out of compassion. Balance isn't found in manuals, it's found in moments." Vance, sitting at the far end, absorbed every word. He'd spent years building armor around his pride. Now, for the first time, he wondered if that armor had kept him safe or trapped. When the session ended, she stood, ready to leave, but Duran called out again. "Ma'am, why do you do this? The talks, the patience, you don't have to." She paused at the door. Her voice was low, almost distant. "Because someone once told me kindness doesn't survive the battlefield. I intend to prove them wrong." Then she left. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reverent. 2 days later, the message arrived. Encrypted, sealed with the insignia of Central Command. The inquiry team was inbound. Arrival 48 hours. She read it twice, her expression unreadable. Then she powered down the tablet, closed her eyes, and exhaled. So it was real. The past wasn't content to stay buried. The next morning, her adjutant noticed her arrive earlier than usual, walking the perimeter at 400 hours. Her breath misted in the cold. She checked the gate security logs, the flight pad, the maintenance roster, every detail she could control, because she knew what she couldn't. Inside the administration office, Vance waited for her, holding a data slate. "Ma'am, reports from the range. The recruits." She took it, nodding once. "Thank you." He hesitated. "Are you all right, Admiral? You look—" He stopped himself. "You look tired." She almost smiled. That's what happens when the past calls early. He didn't understand, but his eyes softened anyway. "If there's anything we can do." "There is." Her gaze lifted to his. "Keep the base steady. Don't let respect become worship. Leaders are just people who stayed standing longer than they wanted to." He nodded, silently promising. As she walked away, he noticed her hand trembled slightly when she adjusted her cap. By afternoon, the inquiry aircraft arrived, a sleek silver transport, cutting through the sky like a blade. It landed with clinical precision, stirring dust and curiosity alike. The soldiers gathered at a distance, whispering. Rumors spread fast: command audit, old case reopened, she's in trouble. She stepped forward alone to greet them. 3 officers disembarked, all in black formal coats, their expressions carved from stone. "Admiral Hale," the lead officer said curtly, "we appreciate your cooperation." "I'm not here to resist," she replied. Good, he said. Then we'll begin tomorrow at 900, private chamber, no interruptions. She nodded, understood. As they walked past, one of them turned slightly. For what it's worth, ma'am, not many would have stayed in service after Al-Kara. Her jaw tightened. For what it's worth, she said evenly, I didn't stay for redemption. I stayed for the ones who couldn't. The officer gave a brief nod. Then they disappeared into the command building. The soldiers pretended to resume drills, but everyone's eyes followed her. For the first time, they saw something they hadn't before, a crack in her composure. Not weakness. Wait. That evening, the sun fell like ash behind the mountains. The base was quieter than usual, anticipation hanging heavy. Inside her office, the inquiry officers waited behind closed doors. Piles of reports, field logs, and casualty lists sat between them. She entered calmly, saluted once, and sat down. The questions began immediately. Describe your decision to enter the hot zone after losing comms. Why did you not request secondary air support? Why did you reassign Lieutenant Rios to point defense against protocol? Every word reopened another scar. Her answers were brief, restrained. Because if she let emotion through, they'd call it bias. If she stayed too detached, they'd call it indifference. There was no winning this room. After 2 hours, they paused for a break. She stood near the window, staring at the desert. It looked calm, it never was. The youngest officer, a woman barely 30, joined her. You saved 7 civilians that day, she said softly. I read the classified report. Command buried that part. Mara didn't turn. They buried all of it. Why? Because the story where everyone lives sells better than the one where you try. The woman nodded slowly. I would have done the same. No, Mara said. You would have done what you thought was right. That's the difference. When the session resumed, her voice carried new steadiness. Not defiance, just acceptance. She answered everything they asked. Every timeline, every failure, every ghost. By the end, the lead officer closed the file and said, We'll deliver findings in 72 hours. You'll be notified. She simply nodded, understood. That night, as the inquiry team slept in the guest quarters, she walked alone to the edge of the training field. The moonlight caught the edge of her insignia. She removed her cap and set it down on the ground beside her boots. The flag above whispered in the night wind. She closed her eyes. The voices came again, her team calling, their laughter over the comms before the ambush. For years, she tried to remember them without guilt. But guilt had a longer memory than love. She knelt, touching the earth. The sand felt the same as Al-Kara, fine, cold, indifferent. Rios, she whispered, I didn't forget you. The silence answered back like understanding. Morning came with drills as usual. Vance approached her quietly during inspection. Ma'am, he said, we heard the inquiries about Al-Kara. Her eyes flicked to him. That's not your concern, Sergeant. With respect, it is. Because if they're questioning you, they're questioning all of us. She studied him, seeing not the arrogant man who shoved her weeks ago, but the soldier learning what loyalty actually meant. You're not here to defend me, she said. No, ma'am, he replied, but I'm here because of you. For a moment, something softened in her face, pride, sorrow, something between. Then she said quietly, then make that reason count. He saluted, firm, without hesitation. And for the first time, she returned it. That night, as the base lights dimmed, she wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in years. Today, they stood taller. Not because of me, but because they saw what resilience looks like when it stops pretending to be perfect. If command strips my title tomorrow, it won't matter. Titles end. Influence doesn't. She closed the notebook, exhaled, and looked at the sky. The stars were faint, but they were there, small proofs of persistence. And in the quiet, Her thoughts whispered the truth she'd never dared to speak aloud. Real strength isn't about how long you can command others. It's about how long you can forgive yourself and still keep leading. The wind carried it away. And for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming. How do you measure redemption? By forgiveness, or by what you do when no one's watching? The inquiry verdict arrived at dawn. A simple envelope, sealed, official, cold. Admiral Mara Hale stared at it on her desk for several minutes before touching it. The paper felt heavier than it looked. Inside were words that would decide whether her command continued or ended. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she looked out her office window. The base was waking up, soldiers jogging across the yard, flags rising, boots meeting gravel in rhythm. The world kept moving, even when your heart didn't. A knock came at the door. "Enter." It was her adjutant, Lieutenant Arden. He hesitated before speaking. "Ma'am, the inquiry team's transport departs at 900. They said to thank you for your cooperation." She nodded, eyes still on the envelope, and they left this message. He handed her a data slate. She read it, just 2 lines. No disciplinary action, case closed, recommendation, commendation reinstated. Her throat tightened, but her face remained still. She expected nothing or worse. Vindication, when it came, felt almost hollow. Arden smiled faintly. "That's good news, ma'am." "Good," she repeated softly. "Good would have been 6 lives still breathing." He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. "Dismissed," she said gently. When the door closed, she finally opened the envelope. The same words, the same hollow victory. And yet, a piece of the weight lifted. For the first time in years, the ghosts in her chest went quiet. Outside, the base was unusually still for morning. The air carried a sense of expectation, as if everyone felt something was about to change. By 800, the inquiry aircraft was on the tarmac. She watched from a distance as the officers boarded. The youngest among them, the woman who'd spoken kindly to her, paused at the ramp and looked back. Their eyes met briefly. No salute, just silent respect. Then the engines roared to life, and the plane lifted into the haze. When it vanished, Mara turned away. Some endings didn't need witnesses. At noon, Sergeant Keller entered her office unannounced, flushed, sweating, radio in hand. "Ma'am, urgent. Convoy Bravo's gone dark." Her eyes sharpened instantly. "Where?" "Supply route 2, 30 clicks west. Last transmission was routine, then static." She stood. "How many aboard?" "7, ma'am. 3 drivers, 4 escorts." "Any sign of hostiles?" "None yet. Could be comm interference, could be worse." She grabbed her jacket and cap. "Assemble rapid response. 2 Humvees, medevac standby." "Admiral, protocol says." "I am the protocol," she said, already moving. Within minutes, the base shifted from order to action. Engines flared, weapons checked, medics loaded stretchers. The old rhythm of war, unwelcome but familiar, returned like muscle memory. Vance jogged up beside her as she climbed into the lead vehicle. "Permission to join the response team, ma'am." "Denied," she said automatically. He didn't move. "With respect, Admiral, you trained us for this. You said command means trust." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she saw it, not arrogance this time, but conviction. She nodded once. "Fine, your lead gunner, don't make me regret it." "Yes, ma'am." The engines roared. The convoy tore through the desert, dust kicking high behind them. The supply route stretched endless, a scar of cracked asphalt through barren sand. The sun glared mercilessly, heat waves distorting the horizon. "Any signal?" she asked over comms. Keller's voice crackled. "Negative. GPS shows interference west of marker 12. "Copy, proceed with caution." Minutes later, they saw it, the first overturned vehicle. wheels still spinning, black smoke bleeding into the sky. "Stop," she ordered. The vehicles halted. Soldiers dismounted, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the dunes. The scene was chaos, scattered crates, bullet holes across the trucks, sand stained dark. "Ambush," Keller said grimly. "Bodies?" she asked. "Two here, three missing." She crouched beside one of the fallen, a young driver, barely 20. She closed his eyes gently, her movements steady, reverent. Then a shout broke the silence. "Tracks West Ridge." Her instincts flared. "Everyone down." A burst of gunfire ripped through the air, sudden, vicious. Bullets chewed into the sand around them. Vance ducked behind a tire, returning fire. Contact, multiple shooters. She moved low, eyes scanning, counting flashes. 7 hostiles, elevated position, Southwest Ridge. "Copy," Keller shouted. The air filled with chaos, orders, shots, sand storms of movement. But beneath it all, her mind was calm, almost detached, the old clarity returning like a forgotten reflex. "Flank left," she commanded. "Suppressive fire on my mark." They moved as one, not perfect but fluid. Every lesson she drilled into them was now muscle memory. She rose, aimed, fired 1, 2, 3 precise bursts. The ridge went quiet. Then a final figure bolted, sprinting across the sand toward the wrecked trucks. She recognized the glint, a detonator in his hand. "Down," she shouted. The explosion tore the world apart. A wave of fire and dust swallowed the convoy. Sound vanished. When she opened her eyes, she was on her back, sand in her teeth, ears ringing. Smoke, screams, movement. "Admiral," it was Vance, dragging Keller out from behind a flipped Humvee. Blood streaked his face, but he was alive. She tried to stand, pain shot through her ribs. She forced herself up anyway. The air reeked of burning oil and cordite. "Status," she rasped. Keller coughed. 3 wounded, no fatalities yet. She nodded. "We stabilize here. Defensive perimeter now." Vance knelt beside her, concern breaking through discipline. "You're hit." She looked down, blood darkening her sleeve. Superficial. He didn't believe it, but he didn't argue. They worked fast, triage, extraction securing the ridge. An hour later, the medevac landed. The sky filled with the mechanical thunder of safety. As the injured were lifted aboard, Vance approached quietly. "Ma'am, if you hadn't come." "Don't finish that sentence," she said softly. "We came because they were ours. That's all that matters." He hesitated. "Still, you let us like I've done this before," she finished for him. He nodded. "And you have," he said, "but not like that. You trusted us." Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no distance between rank and respect. Just shared survival. Back at Fort Garrison, the medics swarmed the return convoy. The base, once calm, now pulsed with urgency. Mara stepped down from the Humvee, dust covering her uniform, a cut on her cheek still bleeding faintly. The soldiers lined up instinctively, not ordered, just drawn by something wordless. She looked at them, every face waiting, tense, respectful. "We lost supplies," she said, voice carrying across the yard, "but we didn't lose each other." The silence that followed was thick. Then she added, softer, "That's the only balance that ever mattered." The men and women before her stood straighter. Even the wounded, leaning on each other, looked proud. Vance stepped forward, saluted sharply. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." She nodded. "Earlier when you said leadership was endurance, I didn't understand. I do now. Endurance isn't about strength, is it?" She tilted her head slightly. "No, it's about what you do after the strength runs out." He nodded once, then quietly, "We're with you, all of us." The words hung there, honest, unforced, final. She turned away slightly, hiding the flicker of emotion that threatened to break through. Commanders didn't cry, not publicly. But inside she felt it, that fragile, quiet thing she hadn't let herself feel in years. Hope. That night as the base slept, she walked the perimeter again. The sky was vast, cold, endless stars glimmering like distant witnesses. She paused near the same flagpole where it had all begun weeks ago, the day they'd shoved her into the dirt, laughed and learned. She remembered it now with strange gratitude, because that moment had built everything that followed. Footsteps approached behind her, Vance again. "Can't sleep either?" he asked softly. "Never could," she replied. He stood beside her, looking out at the dark horizon. "What happens now, ma'am?" "Now," she smiled faintly. "Now we rebuild again, always again." He hesitated, "And the inquiry?" She exhaled. "Closed, they cleared me." "That's good, right?" She looked at him, her eyes tired but gentle. Good would have been never needing one. He nodded slowly, understanding more than she expected. They stood in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Then she said quietly, "You were right about one thing, Sergeant." "What's that?" "Trust." She glanced at him, faint smile returning. "It's the hardest weapon to wield, and the only one that doesn't run out of ammunition." He grinned just slightly. "I'll remember that." "I hope you do," she murmured. The flag above them rippled softly, whispering against the wind. And for the first time, the air around Fort Garrison didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like something closer to peace. Later in her quarters, she finally allowed herself to sit. The cut on her arm throbbed dully. She poured water, stared at her reflection in the small metal mirror, the face of a woman who'd survived too much and still showed up anyway. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes redemption doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from being needed again." She turned off the light, leaving the mirror to fade into darkness. And outside, Fort Garrison slept, guarded not by walls or weapons, but by the quiet strength of the woman who refused to stay down. When the smoke cleared and the silence settled, something at Fort Garrison changed. No orders, no speeches, just the unspoken truth that they'd been through fire and survived because of her. Word of the ambush spread faster than any report could travel. Soldiers from every corner of the base told the story the same way. She was calm when everyone else was. She bled but kept standing. She led from the dirt, not the desk. And just like that, the legend began. But Mara Hale never wanted to be a legend. She just wanted peace. And that, she knew, never lasted. Morning came soft and windless. The desert was strangely quiet, as if holding its breath after the violence. From the command balcony, Admiral Hale watched her soldiers file into formation. The air smelled of disinfectant and dust, a strange blend of recovery and routine. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Arden said, stepping beside her, clipboard in hand. "Med-evac reports are in. The wounded are stable. No fatalities confirmed." She nodded. "Good. Command has requested your incident statement. They're calling it an exemplary demonstration of tactical leadership." Her expression didn't change. They can call it what they want. It was survival, nothing more. Arden hesitated. "Ma'am, most commanders would have been proud." "I'm not most commanders," she said quietly. Then, after a pause, "I'm tired of writing reports about people bleeding." He didn't know how to answer. So he just nodded and left her alone with the view, soldiers moving below, sun catching their helmets, shadows stretching long. Every step they took now carried something new, reverence mixed with purpose. But the part no one saw was what she saw, the fragility behind the strength. Every soldier that followed her was still learning how to live with fear. And she was still learning how to live with ghosts. Later that day, the base gathered near the central yard. No orders, just instinct. Someone started repairing the scorched Humvee that returned from the ambush. Another group planted new training markers. Even the medics joined in, hauling supply crates to restock the infirmary. It wasn't about duty anymore. It was about belonging. Vance was in the middle of it, sleeves rolled, sweat streaking down his face, leading without meaning to. He looked up when he saw her approach. "Admiral," he said, straightening instinctively. "At ease," she said. "How's the rebuild?" "Almost done, ma'am. We wanted it fixed before sundown." She studied him for a moment. The cocky soldier who once shoved her into the dirt was gone. In his place stood a man who understood what leadership cost and what it gave back. "You're doing good work, Sergeant." He blinked as if unsure he'd heard correctly. "Thank you, ma'am." Then she added quietly, "Keep doing it when no one's watching. That's where it matters most." He nodded, voice low, "Yes, ma'am." As she turned to leave, he called out again, "Admiral." She paused. He hesitated. "I've been meaning to say this. About that first day, I think it had to happen." She raised an eyebrow. "Had to?" "Yes, ma'am. Because I wouldn't have understood what respect really was if I hadn't disrespected the wrong person first." Her gaze softened, not forgiveness exactly, but something close. "Sometimes the hardest lessons start in the mud," she said. And she walked away, her steps quiet but sure. That evening the horizon glowed copper and blood red. The desert sky looked on fire, a color she'd seen too many times before. She stood alone by the fence line, the wind lifting strands of her hair. The radio crackled behind her. Arden's voice came through. "Ma'am, you should come to Ops. Command Channel Priority 1. Her stomach tightened. "On my way." When she entered the operations room, the tone was already grim. The command insignia pulsed on the main screen, and with it, a familiar voice. "Admiral Hale," the general said, "good work on the Bravo response. Your leadership prevented a full-scale loss." "Thank you, sir," she replied evenly. "But that's not why I'm calling." The man's tone darkened. "Satellite scans show multiple armed groups moving through the western corridor. Looks like organized insurgent movement, possibly the same cell that hit your convoy." Her jaw clenched. "Estimated numbers?" "Unknown, but large. You're the closest active command. We need you to intercept before they cross the border line." "Understood. I'll mobilize the base." "There's more," the general continued. "Intel suggests they're transporting captives, civilians." That word, civilians, landed like a weight. "How certain?" she asked. 50% at best. Satellites picking heat signatures in containers. Could be ammo, could be people. You'll have to decide on site." Her silence stretched long. "Understood, sir." "Admiral," his tone softened slightly. "I know what this reminds you of. Don't let it." She nodded once. "Permission to proceed." "Granted." And Hale? "Yes, sir." "Bring them home, this time all of them." The transmission ended. The room fell quiet. Vance and Keller exchanged uneasy glances. Arden looked to her. "Orders, ma'am." She straightened. "Mobilize strike teams Alpha and Echo. Evac medic support. No artillery unless confirmed hostile. We move at first light." "Yes, ma'am." As they dispersed, Arden lingered. "Ma'am, if there are civilians?" "We bring them back," she said, "even if it costs us." He hesitated. "Command didn't say that." "I don't need them to." By midnight the base was alive again, engines humming, rifles checked, vehicles fueled. But this time there was no nervous laughter, no bravado, just quiet focus. Mara moved among them like a shadow, checking each line, each formation. Soldiers straightened when she passed, not out of fear but pride. When she reached the last truck, Vance stood waiting. "Ready, ma'am." "Are you afraid?" she asked. He thought for a second. "Yes, but not the same way I used to be." She nodded. "Then you're ready." He frowned. "You?" She smiled faintly. "Always afraid, that's why I'm still alive." Then she climbed into the lead vehicle. The desert before dawn was a world made of whispers, the kind that carried memories. The engines rumbled low, lights dimmed. They moved fast but silent, guided by satellite feed and instinct. Marker 12 in sight, Keller reported. No visuals yet. Copy, she said. Advance with caution. Minutes later, the first shape appeared, a convoy of trucks half buried in sand, their engines cold. But no smoke, no gunfire, no movement. Ambush or aftermath, she murmured. They dismounted, fanning out. The silence was unnatural, too still, too staged. Then a faint sound broke it. A cough, small, weak, human. Over here, Vance called. They found them in the back of a transport, huddled civilians, bruised, dehydrated, terrified. 6 of them, 2 children. Arden exhaled. Sir was right, captives. She knelt beside a woman, offering water. The woman's hands shook. They left when they saw the smoke. They said more were coming. More, Mara asked. How many? Many, the woman whispered. Too many. Then the sound came, distant at first, then swelling. Engines, fast, approaching from the west. Keller cursed under his breath. They're coming back. Mara stood. Form perimeter, evac the civilians into Vehicle 2, move. The soldiers moved like clockwork, adrenaline silent but sharp. She checked her rifle, full mag, chamber ready. Vance ran up beside her. Ma'am, we're outnumbered. She glanced at him. Then we'll make them think we are. He nodded once. No fear, just trust. The first wave hit minutes later, trucks cresting the dunes, headlights blinding. Gunfire erupted, tearing through the dawn. But this time the soldiers didn't scatter, they held. Every drill, every lesson, every scar, it all converged here. Mara moved through the chaos like a conductor through noise, her voice cutting clear through the comms. Line 2, shift left. Vance, mark targets, don't waste shots. Explosions lit the ridge, smoke rolling thick. Through the haze, she saw civilians being pulled to safety, medics dragging them toward the evac trucks. Then a blast threw her off her feet. Sand and light, silence again. When she lifted her head, she saw Arden bleeding near the comms unit, Keller shouting for cover, Vance firing from the ridge. And through it all, the sound of the evac truck starting, engines roaring to life. Go, she shouted, get them out. Vance turned. What about you? She smiled faintly. Someone has to stay till the music stops. He hesitated, then nodded, eyes burning with understanding. She rose, firing until the last truck cleared the ridge. The noise, the smoke, the chaos, it all folded into one endless moment. And then quiet again. When the dust finally settled, the horizon was empty. No enemy. No threat, just the sound of wind brushing against the ruins of another near disaster. She lowered her rifle slowly, her body shaking from exhaustion, her mind clear as glass. For a long time she just stood there, alone, the desert stretching endlessly around her. Hours later, the evac returned. They found her sitting beside the burned-out convoy, cap off, hair tangled, staring at the rising sun. Ma'am, Vance said softly, approaching. They're safe, all of them. She didn't look at him. Good. He sat beside her, silent, stretching. Why didn't you fall back? She exhaled slowly. Because someone had to make sure the ones who ran didn't get caught running. He nodded. You ever get tired of being right, Admiral? She almost smiled. Every day. They sat there a while longer. 2 soldiers watching a sky that never seemed to change. Then she said quietly, today fear didn't win, not theirs, not mine. Vance looked at her, not as a subordinate, but as someone trying to understand the measure of strength. How do you do it? He asked. Keep standing after everything. She thought for a moment. By remembering that others don't get to anymore. Back at Fort Garrison, the rescued civilians were treated, fed, and given shelter. The soldiers walked among them with newfound gentleness. the kind only born from proximity to loss. And the Admiral, she returned to her office, removed her jacket and sat in silence. Outside, the flag swayed softly in the fading light. Her reflection stared back from the window, tired, scarred, alive. Her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes strength isn't about never falling. It's about who you lift when you do. She looked toward the horizon, the same horizon that had taken so much from her and given her this one thing back: purpose. And for the first time she felt it, not peace exactly, but something close. Hope again. Quiet, earned, real. How do you punish someone for doing what was right? Command always finds a way. 2 days after the rescue, a coded communique arrived from Central Command. Formal, polite, cold. Admiral Mara Hale, you exceeded operational authority by initiating unsanctioned engagement in Zone 12. Effective immediately. Stand by for disciplinary review pending further investigation. No thank you. No mention of the civilians saved. Just policy, precise, merciless. She stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then she shut it off. Outside her window, Fort Garrison breathed drills, shouts, the smell of dust and oil. Life going on. Always going on. But she could feel it, that slow, quiet tightening in her chest. The same one that always came before the world tried to take back the little she'd built. The first to hear was Vance. He found her standing alone near the comms tower, wind whipping her hair, the desert sky a hard blue behind her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "it's true, they're reviewing you again." She didn't answer at first. The silence stretched between them. "They'll call it insubordination," she said finally, "because that's easier than calling it mercy." He shook his head. "You saved 6 people, civilians. Policy doesn't measure humanity, Sergeant. It measures obedience." He clenched his jaw. "Then policy's broken." She turned to him. "No, Vance, it's just efficient. It punishes mistakes faster than it forgives intentions." He swallowed. "So what happens now?" "I wait. They'll decide whether compassion is still a crime." She started to walk away, but he stepped in front of her, not blocking, just refusing to let her drift back into silence. "Ma'am, if they take you away, this place falls apart." She looked at him then, really looked. The dust on his boots, the sweat, the worry. The same soldier who once mocked her now standing like a shield between her and the world. "No," she said softly, "it won't, because if it does, then I failed at the only thing that mattered." He frowned. "Which is?" "Teaching you not to need me." She walked past him, leaving the wind to fill the space her words left behind. Inside her quarters that night, the lamp flickered weakly. The room smelled of sand and old coffee. She sat at her desk, staring at the unopened box from command, the commendation they'd promised after the inquiry. It was still sealed. She reached for her pen instead and began writing, not a report, not an apology, a letter. To command, to no one, to herself. "I broke protocol because I've seen what waiting for permission costs. I made a choice, one I'll make again. If that costs me rank, so be it. Rank doesn't keep people alive, decisions do." She stopped, ink pooling at the end of the sentence. Her hand trembled slightly, the exhaustion finally catching up. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter." It was Lieutenant Arden, face pale, datapad in hand. "Ma'am, you should see this." She followed him to the operations room. A live feed was projected on the main screen, a televised briefing from Central Command HQ. The spokesperson's voice echoed over static. "Pending review of Admiral Hale's unauthorized engagement in Zone 12, interim command decisions at Fort Garrison will be subject to oversight. Effective immediately, Admiral Hale is relieved of field duty until the investigation concludes." The room went still. Every soldier within earshot froze. Some looked angry, Some looked lost. Arden turned to her. "Ma'am." "It's all right," she said quietly. "Orders are orders." Vance stepped forward, jaw tight. "With respect, Admiral, no, they're not." "Sergeant." "No," he said again, louder this time. "You taught us to stand when it mattered. Well, it matters now." She saw the fire in his eyes, the same kind that once burned in hers before command dulled it with paperwork and consequence. "Vance," she said, lowering her voice, "you'll follow orders. All of you will. We don't break discipline just because it's inconvenient." "Then what do?" he asked. "Sit and wait while people who weren't there decide what right looks like." Her silence was answer enough. He turned away, frustrated but not out of disrespect. Out of loyalty he didn't know how to show. The next morning the base felt heavier, drills quieter, laughter gone. Everyone pretended not to watch her as she walked the grounds. Every salute carried something unspoken. "We're with you." She tried to hide the limp that hadn't fully healed from the ambush, but Vance noticed anyway. He walked beside her without a word. When they reached the edge of the training field, he said softly, "You ever think about quitting, ma'am?" She looked at the horizon. "Every day." He nodded. "So why don't you?" She smiled faintly. "Because if I did, the world would have one less person trying to make it gentler." They stood there in silence, two soldiers, one broken by command, one rebuilt by her. Then from the barracks, a commotion, shouting, hurried footsteps. Arden ran up. "Ma'am, you need to see this." They followed him to the comm center. A live feed, civilian rescue reports. The same 6 people they'd saved were giving statements to the press. One of the rescued women stood before the camera, voice trembling. "She didn't ask for our names," she said. "She just said, 'You're safe now.' If she hadn't come, we'd be dead. She didn't care about orders. She cared about us." Reporters shouted questions. The woman ignored them. "You tell your command that some rules aren't meant to be followed." The feed cut. Silence filled the room. Vance turned to her, smiling faintly. "Looks like the world finally heard the right story." She didn't smile back, "Not yet. They'll still try to bury it." "Then we'll dig it up again," he said simply. She looked at him, proud, sad, grateful all at once. "Careful, Sergeant. That sounds like leadership." He shrugged. "Guess I had a decent teacher." By nightfall, command called again. This time it wasn't a letter. It was the general himself. "Admiral Hale," he said, tone clipped but not cold. "We've seen the footage. The rescued civilians went public. The press is running your name." "I didn't ask them to." "I know, that's the problem." "Or maybe that's the solution," she replied. He sighed. "You made us look rigid, Hale." "I made you look human," she corrected. "That's different." A pause. Then surprisingly the general chuckled, a dry, tired sound. "You never learn, do you?" "On the contrary," she said softly, "I learn too well." He exhaled. "Investigation over. You're reinstated, officially commended for decisive field action. The politicians will call it strategic initiative. Don't correct them." "I won't." "But Hale," his tone softened, "next time you disobey, make sure there isn't a camera." She smiled faintly. "No promises." The call ended. When she stepped outside, the base was alive again, laughter returning, drills sharper, the tension gone. The sun had dipped low, painting everything in gold. Vance approached, reading her expression before she spoke. "You're cleared," he guessed. "Seems so." He grinned. "Guess they finally realized command needs a heart." "Careful," she said. "They might court-martial you for that sentence." He laughed, and for a moment, the sound reminded her what normal felt like. Then she grew quiet again. "Vance, about earlier, when you said if they take me away, this place falls apart, you were wrong." He frowned. "How so?" She looked around, soldiers training, medics laughing, the base alive. "This place doesn't need me anymore. That means I did my job." He nodded slowly. What about you? What do you need? She hesitated. The question lingered longer than she expected. Then softly, maybe just a day where no one needs saving. He smiled. Then tomorrow's yours, Admiral. She almost laughed. Tomorrow never is. That night the desert wind carried warmth instead of chill. The sky shimmered with 1,000 distant lights, quiet witnesses to a life rebuilt one choice at a time. Mara walked the perimeter alone as she always did. The sand crunched under her boots, steady, measured. Every step echoed with the ghosts of every decision she'd made, right or wrong. She stopped by the flagpole again, the same one from her first day. The same one where she'd stood, humiliated, covered in dust, pretending it didn't matter. Now the same flag fluttered softly above her head, catching the last light of the moon. She whispered, "You see at Rio's." They finally listened. The wind answered in silence, the only reply she'd ever get. Then she smiled, small, tired, real. Because she knew something now that even command didn't. That leadership wasn't about perfection or obedience or even victory. It was about endurance and kindness, even when no one thanked you for it. Later in her office she wrote again, not a report this time, not a defense, just truth. Today they tried to punish compassion. Tomorrow they'll try again. But somewhere, some soldier will remember a moment of mercy and carry it forward. And that's how wars really end, not when we stop fighting, but when we stop forgetting why we began. She closed the notebook, placed it on her desk, and turned off the light. Outside, Fort Garrison slept soundly, not because the world was safe, but because for once they believed they could make it safer. And for Admiral Mara Hale, that was enough. For tonight, when the noise fades, what's left? Sometimes it isn't peace. It's the echo of everything you never said. Fort Garrison had finally gone quiet. No investigations, no alarms, no distant orders crackling through the radio. Just routine, the kind that made lesser soldiers restless and veterans suspicious. Admiral Mara Hale should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something she hadn't in years. Emptiness. She woke before dawn, the habit of every commander who never truly sleeps. The barracks lights were still dim, the air cool, the corridors smelling faintly of metal and detergent. Outside, the horizon bled pale orange. She stood on the balcony, coffee steaming in her hand, watching the sky shift color by color. For the first time, she noticed how beautiful the desert looked when it wasn't burning. A knock broke the stillness. "Come in." It was Vance, half in uniform, hair tousled, fatigue etched beneath his eyes. "Morning, ma'am," he said softly. "Didn't think anyone else would be up." "Insomnia's the most faithful soldier I have," she replied. He smiled a little, then hesitated. "You ever stop hearing it?" "Hearing what?" "The things you couldn't fix." She looked out over the yard again. "No, they just learned to whisper instead of scream." He nodded, chewing on the thought. Then, almost shyly, "The men are planning a small thing tonight for you. Barbecue by the hangar, no speeches, just thanks." Approval. "It's not official," he admitted, "but it's real." She looked at him, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Then it's probably worth attending." He grinned. "I'll tell them you said yes." When he left, she realized her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in too long, belonging. That evening, smoke rose from an old oil drum-turned grill. Someone found music on a battered radio. Someone else traded rations for spices. Laughter drifted through the air, rough, genuine, almost childlike. She stood at the edge of it all, a paper plate in hand, watching her soldiers act like human beings again. No ranks, no fear, just people who'd seen the same hell and come out breathing. Private Lynn spotted her first. "Admiral, over here." He waved her toward a group sitting on cargo crates. Keller was telling a story, some impossible half-true tale about the ambush. The others roared with laughter. When she joined them, the noise softened. Everyone straightened a little, uncertain how to behave. "At ease," she said gently. "I came for the food, not formality." That broke the tension. Someone handed her a plate, someone else a tin cup of something pretending to be coffee. For a few minutes she listened. The laughter, the teasing, the stories, they filled the air with a kind of warmth she'd forgotten existed. Then Keller raised his cup. "To the Admiral, who reminds us that orders don't mean anything without heart." A chorus of "hear, hear" followed. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "If you start quoting poetry, I'm leaving." More laughter, real this time. For the first time, she wasn't observing the moment. She was in it. Later, when most had drifted away, she stayed behind to help douse the coals. The night air was cool, the stars bright enough to hurt. Vance lingered too, kicking sand over the embers. "You know," he said, "they'd follow you anywhere." "They already do." "Not because of duty," he said, "because they believe in you." She crouched beside the dying fire, stirring the ash with a stick. "Belief is dangerous, Vance. It asks for pieces of you you don't get back." He looked at her. "Maybe that's what makes it worth giving." For a moment she didn't answer. Then she said quietly, "You sound like someone who's seen too much." He smiled sadly. "I have. I watched a woman get pushed into the mud and stand up stronger than the men who laughed." She met his eyes, the flicker of flame catching between them. "That woman's just tired of staying down." He studied her a moment longer. "You ever let anyone in, ma'am?" Her breath caught slightly. "Into what?" "The part that's still bleeding." She looked away, the silence stretching until it almost hurt. Then she said, "That part doesn't need saving." He nodded slowly. "Maybe not, but it deserves to be seen." He left her then, because he understood something most people never did. Sometimes caring meant walking away before you broke what you wanted to fix. She sat there long after the fire died, the stars watching like quiet witnesses. The next morning, a storm rolled in, rare for that desert. The sky turned slate gray, the wind harsh and cold. It rattled the hangar doors and tore the flag halfway from its line. She stood beneath the awning, rain streaking down her uniform, and felt an odd kind of peace. The radio cracked. "Ma'am," Arden's voice came through, "command requesting confirmation. Jointop's mission forming. They want Fort Garrison as forward support." Of course, calm never lasted. "Details?" "Minimal, classified channel, but the general himself is en route. ETA 2 hours." She exhaled. "Understood, prep conference room, no leaks." As she hung up the receiver, she looked out at the soldiers scrambling to secure equipment from the rain. She could see it in their movements, discipline mixed with trust. Her base, her people. She whispered, "Not again, not like before." But deep down, she already knew the pattern. Every time she built something that felt human, command sent her another war to test it. The storm didn't let up. The general arrived under sheets of rain, coat soaked, expression unreadable. "Admiral Hale," he greeted curtly, "you run a tight ship." "I try," she said, "though technically it's a desert." He almost smiled, "Almost, walk with me." They paced the corridor together, rain hammering against the roof. He said, "Command's forming an international task force. Humanitarian escort mission, high risk. You've been requested to lead ground coordination." She frowned. "Requested or volunteered?" "Both." She stopped walking. "And if I decline?" "You won't." He wasn't wrong, she never did. "What's the objective?" she asked. "Refugee extraction. Border city under siege. Civilians trapped between insurgents and collapsing infrastructure." Her stomach tightened. Al-Qaeda all over again. "Yes," he said simply, "and that's why they need you." She stared out the window, lightning flashing across the dunes. You realize what you're asking. I do, and I wouldn't if I thought anyone else could hold that line. He handed her a file. You have 48 hours to prepare. I'll leave the decision to your conscience. Then he left her there, alone with rain, thunder, and ghosts. That night she couldn't sleep. The storm outside had calmed, but inside her head it hadn't. Alcara, the word itself, was a wound. She opened the file. Maps, names, projected casualties. It was a mirror of the past. And in the margin, one handwritten note from the general. Don't atone, lead. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, what if they're the same thing? A soft knock. Come in, she said automatically. Vance again, he looked hesitant. Ma'am, rumor says we're moving. Rumor's efficient. You're taking it, aren't you? I haven't decided. Yes, you have, he said quietly. You always decide before you admit it. She looked down at the papers, the maps, the ghosts. You think I should go? He shook his head. I think you already know why you will. She sighed. You sound like my conscience. He smiled faintly. You gave us all a piece of yours. Someone has to return the favor. She closed the file slowly. If we go, it won't be like before. No unnecessary heroics. We save who we can, we come home. He nodded, understood. Then before leaving, he said, Ma'am, you don't have to prove you're unbreakable. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's the only thing I've ever been good at. He paused at the door. No, the thing you're good at is making the rest of us believe we can be, too. When he was gone, she sat for a long time, the silence pressing close. Then she opened her journal. They'll ask again, and I'll go again. Not because I have to win, but because somewhere, someone still believes kindness survives the battlefield. She set the pen down, staring at the page until the ink dried. Outside, the flag caught the new wind and snapped once, sharp, defiant. Tomorrow, there would be another mission. Another test. Another chance to stand. And this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. What do you owe to the ghosts who never left? Maybe just one more dawn. Fort Garrison woke under red skies. Wind cut through the yard like a warning. Engines hummed, packs were loaded, and for the first time no one complained. They all knew what was coming. Admiral Mara Hale stood by the command jeep, maps folded under her arm. Her voice was calm, steady. We move at 600. We don't fire unless we must. Our mission is lives, not numbers. The soldiers nodded. Every eye carried the same promise: we follow. Vance stepped closer. You sure you want point, ma'am? I'm sure, she said. If this turns into chaos, they'll look for a voice. It should be mine. He hesitated. If we don't make it. She stopped him with a look. Then we make it count. The convoy rolled into the desert. 8 vehicles, 2 medevac, a satellite relay truck. The wind carved ridges through the sand, turning everything into motion. As they neared the ruined border city, the air changed. Smoke on the horizon, the distant percussion of gunfire. Contact ahead, Keller reported. Insurgents engaging civilian transports near the East Quarter. Mara checked the map. Split teams. Alpha cuts north flank, Echo covers evac route. Civilians first, always first. The comms crackled with acknowledgments. Orders turned into movement. The machine of compassion she'd built was running on instinct. Then the first blast tore through the street. The ground shook, windows shattered, voices screamed. RPG, someone yelled. Left roof. Myra ducked behind a crumbling wall, adrenaline flooding her veins. Return fire controlled. Pin them, don't level them. Vance sprinted ahead, dragging a wounded civilian behind cover. They're everywhere, ma'am. Hold the line. The fight blurred into noise, smoke, commands, heartbeat, dust. And through it all, she felt the strange calm again, the place inside her that only woke in chaos. She saw a boy, maybe 10, crouched beside a burned-out car, eyes wide, paralyzed. She ran through open ground, scooped him up, shielded his head as debris rained down. "Got you," she whispered, not sure who she was saying it to. Behind her, Keller shouted, "We're clear, civilians secure." She turned to move, then saw it. The flash from a nearby window. The sharp, unnatural shimmer of another rocket launch. There wasn't time to think. She shoved the child toward Vance. "Run." Then the world went white. When sound returned, it came as a ringing hum, distant, hollow, endless. The sky was wrong, half smoke, half light. She was on the ground, her side burning, her vision fractured. Vance's voice far away, "Admiral, medic." Hands grabbed her, voices blurred. She tried to speak, couldn't. The boy was safe, that was all that mattered. Through the haze she saw the flag patch on Vance's arm, saw the terror in his eyes. "Stay with us," he said, "please." She wanted to tell him she'd heard those words before, that sometimes staying wasn't the point, but no sound came. Then darkness again. When she woke, it was night. The hum of engines, the antiseptic sting of the medevac cabin, shadows moving around her. Vance sat beside the stretcher, eyes red, rifle across his lap. "You're alive," he said softly. She swallowed, voice barely there. "Status." "Mission complete, civilians safe, minimal losses." "Minimal," she rasped. He nodded. "Keller took shrapnel but made it, the rest pulled through." She closed her eyes. Relief hurt more than the wound. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "Still here, you're harder to kill, though." For a long while they said nothing. The sound of the rotors filled the silence. Then he added quietly, "You saved that kid, the one from the car. He keeps asking for the woman with the silver eyes." She almost laughed. "Tell him I'm just a tired soldier." He shook his head. "I'll tell him you're proof that orders can have a soul." Her eyes softened. "Don't start turning me into myth, Vance. That's how the truth gets lost." He met her gaze. "Maybe, but sometimes the truth needs a story to survive." Fort Garrison welcomed them back under a blood-orange sunrise. The base, once dust and indifference, now felt alive, purposeful. Every soldier who'd once mocked her was waiting at the gate, lined up without command. As she was carried out on the stretcher, they saluted. No orders, just instinct. She lifted a trembling hand in return. The gesture was small, but it rippled through them like thunder. Later in the infirmary, command called. The general's voice filled the room. "You disobeyed direct evacuation orders again," he said, "and saved 97 civilians." She smiled weakly, so still undecided on the reprimand. He chuckled quietly. "Not this time, Hale. The world saw what you did. Footage is everywhere. You reminded people what leadership looks like. Messy. Human." He paused. "They're calling it the Hale evacuation now." She sighed. "Don't name it after me." "Too late," he said. "Get some rest, Admiral. You've earned at least a week of peace." She hung up, shaking her head. Peace was always temporary. But for once, temporary was enough. Days passed. The wound healed slowly. She refused transfer to the Capitol Hospital. She wanted to stay at Fort Garrison, her ground, her people. The soldiers visited one by one. Keller, bandaged but grinning. Lynn, holding flowers he clearly stole from the mess garden. Even the cooks came by with extra coffee. And every time someone left the room, she felt the same quiet pride. They had grown into the kind of soldiers who wouldn't have needed her once. Vance came last. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets. The evening light fell across his face, soft, uncertain. "You ever going to take a day off?" he asked. "Soon," she lied. He smirked. "You said that after the last 3 missions. This one felt final." "Nothing's ever final with you." She looked out at the training yard, where new recruits were running drills. "Maybe that's the point." He hesitated. When I first met you, I thought you were cold. I was, she said. Not anymore. She turned to him, tired but warm. Careful, Sergeant, you're starting to sound sentimental. He smiled. Guess you taught me that too. He moved to leave, then stopped at the door. The kid you saved drew you something, said you were the lady who doesn't fall down. I told him that's accurate. Her voice was soft. Keep it for me. Sure thing, ma'am. After he left, she leaned back, closing her eyes. For the first time, she didn't see the faces of those she'd lost. She saw the ones she'd saved. Maybe that was enough. Weeks later, she stood again where it had all begun. The training yard, the flag, the dust. Her limp was still there, faint but real. She didn't hide it. The soldiers were drilling. A new recruit stumbled. The others laughed, the same cruel sound from long ago. She stepped forward. The laughter died instantly. Help her up, she said quietly. They obeyed. She looked at them, firm, calm, the voice of experience wrapped in gentleness. Every hand you extend makes this place stronger. Every laugh you swallow builds something better. Remember that. The recruits nodded, shame and understanding mingling. The same lesson passing forward. She turned toward the flag, eyes on the horizon. The sun caught her silver insignia. For a heartbeat, it glowed brighter than the sky. Vance's voice came from behind. You thinking of retiring, ma'am? She smiled faintly. Retiring? No, just slowing down. He chuckled. The base won't be the same when you do. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be better. They stood together in silence, wind sweeping over the dunes. Do you ever wonder, he said softly, what they'll remember about all this? She thought for a moment. Probably not the medals, maybe not even the missions, but maybe they'll remember that for a while someone believed in them enough to make them believe in themselves. He nodded slowly. That sounds like a good legacy. She looked at the horizon one last time. The endless desert she had turned into something living. Then she said, almost to herself, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The flag above them snapped once in the wind, crisp, defiant, alive. And Fort Garrison kept breathing, proof that strength could be gentle, that mercy could lead, that even those who fell first could teach the rest how to rise. Because respect isn't demanded. It's earned moment by moment when no one's watching. And for Admiral Mara Hale, that was all the victory the world would ever need.